Hello, everybody. It's great to join you virtually, and thank you again to everyone for participating with us. It's genuinely my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with Eric Gross, who really has been a fundamental technical and philosophical inspiration for much of what we've been doing with the Cataling project. Just briefly, by way of background, before we turn to Eric with some questions. Eric is someone who comes to these issues as the former engineering vice president for security at Google, where he learned to stand up to the world's leading government and independent hackers. So he knows a thing or two about the challenges that we're trying to tackle here. In retirement, since leaving Google, he's returned to, as he describes it to us, the minimalist systems that he first learned to design when working in the Unix room at Bell Labs. So welcome, Eric. It's genuinely, it's a pleasure. It's always wonderful to be able to talk through some of these issues with you. But I think for everybody in the room there, they don't get the chance to engage with you on these issues as often as we do. So thank you. Thank you for making time.
Thanks. Nice to chat with you, and delighted to actually chat with others in the room if they have follow-up questions.
I love that, and everybody there, he means it. He's very much animated by these things as we are. So, Eric, why don't we kick it off? Talk a little bit about the risk that we're grappling with, right? So much of your past and what brought you to this conversation has to do with cyber capabilities, offensive cyber capabilities that adversaries might have. We do see a world today where that bar to entry is lowering, where things are getting cheaper or more accessible, increasingly automated, and I think that's only going to intensify. So in light of those dynamics, in your opinion, how should states be thinking about and rethinking their assumptions about what secure leader-to-leader communications capabilities really look like?
Well, you're right. And just the news in the last couple of weeks, Anthropic's Claude has been finding vulnerabilities. So yes, countries should assume that their old comms and their old IT systems in general are at risk. In fact, they already were even before this latest.
As you think about that, fundamentally, where is that nexus of these sorts of cyber capabilities with comms? How does that actually come to be? What's maybe some examples of how that might take shape?
Well, anytime you have a vulnerable computer, of course, folks are going to play games with it. And in particular, you've mentioned in the past that you've been worried about what happens when people are using the kinds of comms they've used before, phone calls. And as we know, the phone system, and I used to work at Bell Labs, the phone system was designed in a previous era before we really knew about encryption or authentication. And so as a good example of how that comes to play in this crisis comms arena, in 2022, a Russian prankster called up the Polish president, Duda, shortly after a missile landed on one of his villages near the Ukraine border, and pretended to be French President Macron. And they carried on a conversation for like 7 minutes. That just goes to show, if you're still using phone calls as your crisis communication channel, it could be embarrassing. And there are much better things that you could be doing today.
In terms of kind of the technical elements of that, right? In a world where voice, image, basically everything now is unreliable. What are the kinds of things that come to mind? And what I mean by that is voice is way too easy to spoof now.
Even video is.
And even video is, right? No matter who you are. And so from a technical perspective, what are some of the ways that you think about how comms could be more resilient in the face of those sorts of really kind of cutting edge risks?
So for years ago, I moved with my friends and family off the phone system to Signal networks. Great.
Yeah.
Thereby, you have a chance to establish in advance some cryptographic credentials so that you're sure that it's not an imposter who just somehow picked an AI that looks like your mother, and when she says, "Oh, please wire me $5 million," you know better, right? You're not going to
Right.
get scammed that way.
Right.
So that's an easy thing. For here
Right.
are some of the more advanced techniques that you need to use
Right.
in a context where it's not just someone trying to scam a relative. We're talking about national leaders and extremely important situations developing where
Yeah.
the consequences are vast. And for that, it's worth upping your game.
In terms of, often in our conversations around these issues, the typical refrain is, well, what's wrong with the state of the art?
Sure.
As we've all seen, a lot of very senior folks are now very dependent on Signal, by way of example.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a great platform. As I say, I'm happy to use it. It does depend on the devices that you're using, such as a cell phone is a very complicated device, probably running not only Signal, but a lot of other applications and a lot of other things. And it's just hard to get all of that absolutely right. But even if that device is secure, it, more importantly, depends on a lot of other central infrastructure working. And we have seen that in times of trouble, things may go down. There's a common network infrastructure refrain. It's DNS. It's always DNS. There
Right.
are
Right.
protocols out there that were not built to withstand some of the attacks that we see today.
Yeah.
Now, a modern competent military has perfectly secure comms that work for them, for their strategic needs. That's not the context of Catalink. What we're trying to do is deal with a situation where, yes, a lot is going wrong. Advanced attackers are disrupting a lot of infrastructure. But more importantly, we need a crisis communication system that can be used by adversaries who are not willing to trust each other at all. Not
Yeah.
at all. And that means we're solving a different technical problem than typically anyone bothers to do. Normally, the secure comms is within a certain organization where people more or less trust each other. I mean, you have to deal with insider risks and so forth, but mostly that's a solved problem with existing things that people could adopt. Maybe they're commercial solutions or open source solutions. But here, we're trying to say, how could the United States and North Korea come up with a system that each of them could trust? I mean, obviously, North Korea is not going to trust a piece of code written by the United States and vice versa. So what we think we need here for crisis comms is an open source solution that is so small that it can be independently reviewed, all down to the bits, by each country independently. They don't have to trust, they don't have to take it on authority from anyone else. And that is a slightly different situation than we're used to, because it still needs to be strong. The crypto still needs to be, quantum resistant, et cetera.
You spoke to the fact that if you're using Signal, that's solid, that's great, that's reliable. But it's the device that it's on, it's the network that it uses. I think a lot of the folks in the room there might not necessarily be worrying about their own personal usage of Signal, but why can't we imagine a leader using a device that they've kind of got? Like, what is it about what we've been talking about within the Catalink context that would actually provide that assurance and that ability to think a little bit more that what you've got is something that is secure?
And that will give a good context for the sort of the flavor of the Catalink project and what we've built. So if you're doing this kind of crisis communications, I think the best analogy is a diplomatic courier who takes a letter that's been carefully drafted and thought through and put in a sealed envelope, and the courier carries it from one country to another country. And this is very much what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis. The trouble with a courier carrying a physical letter is that it's just not fast enough for today's actions. It wasn't really even fast enough in the Cuban Missile Crisis, but we lucked out.
Right.
So we're looking for an electronic equivalent of that. And for sending text messages end-to-end encrypted between Moscow and Washington, a laptop is a perfectly sound device for doing that kind of thing. We also have some gadget like this, you could see, is also capable of doing it, and probably easier to keep with the president's nuclear football. But the idea is, with something like this, even the hardware is open source. And so you can really dig down and decide you're trusting everything on that endpoint. And with end-to-end encryption, all the secrets are on the endpoint. None of the other technology in the middle ever sees the unencrypted text. So you have a chance to really do it right. We call this thing the puck, that endpoint, but it's a battery device. So it might not be on all the time, right? So how are you going to send this ciphertext right away if the endpoints are powered off battery devices? So what we envision is that each country runs its own broker. That's a kind of relay. It's an ordinary computer plugged into the internet or radio links or satellite comms, whatever. And that can receive the ciphertext at any time because its location is well known. And then the puck, which may be at a secret location, doesn't want to connect to any network because it doesn't want to reveal the president's location because he doesn't want to be bombed or kidnapped or something. And the puck calls the broker when it needs to and fetches those messages. And that's what we've demonstrated in some of the previous workshops in this series, right? How easy that is to use. So that's a pretty good way to go.
So this gives us a bit more of a reliable, authenticated, secure option. One last piece of this that you've been so instructive for us on with your background, thinking about highly complex systems, something that you've noted to us repeatedly, right? Complexity is the enemy of security. What is the advantage then of ensuring that there is this open source option that's been designed in an incredibly simple way? Is that really all that much better? Can't that have vulnerabilities too? Yeah.
Again, the idea is you give adversaries a chance to check this out for themselves. If they're building nuclear weapons, by definition, they're a country that does not trust anybody. They're not going to take anything on authority. They want to do it for themselves. So we encourage them, come to our GitHub site, see the source code for yourself. It's quite small. You can review it easily. And I think, for your audience, I would encourage a country to put together a small technical team. Come take a look at it. I think you'll enjoy looking at it. And as I said earlier, no doubt you'll have some things that you think you ought to be changed or something, and we would welcome hearing from you. Would enjoy that conversation.
A collaborative effort. All right. Well, we'll turn to everybody back in the room now. But Eric, thank you again for really, I think, the vision and so much of the hard work that's gone into the technical side of this and your leadership on this. So thank you again.
Thanks.